bring in now Senator Ted Cruz, Republican senator from Texas. And I wanted to pick up there. You're a member of the Judiciary Committee that have to confirm Christopher Wray. And there seemed to be a consensus then that accepting foreign help in an election is wrong. Yet during the hearings, House Republicans defended President Trump's request for foreign investigations into Joe Biden and the Democrats. If it's wrong to accept foreign help in an election, why is it right to ask for it?
Well, look, there's a difference between foreign interference of the kind Russia did, which was hacking into the election, creating fraudulent bots, actively trying to deceive people, and law enforcement investigation into corruption. We cooperate with law enforcement with countries all over the earth, and one of the central issues right at the heart of this discussion is on the face of the transcript with Zelensky. What President Trump is asking for is assistance with the U.S. government with investigating corruption. That is inherently within the authority of the president and the Department of Justice to do, and that is their responsibility to do. But
Senator Cruz, as you know, in that phone call, the president never mentions the word corruption. He talks about CrowdStrike. He talks about the Bidens. And back in September, you actually said, yeah, you wish the president wouldn't have gone down that road to look into the Bidens, to call for investigations into the Bidens. So what's changed?
Well, look, what I said is there's an appearance of impropriety, and that appearance allows political opponents to exploit it, to turn into the kind of circus we've seen. But what I also said is there is real prima facie evidence of corruption. You take, for example, the Bidens. We know that Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, was receiving up to $83,000 a month to serve on the board of the largest natural gas company in Ukraine, Burisma. $83,000 a month, that's $1 million a year. That's nearly 10 times as much as ExxonMobil pays its directors. And Hunter Biden, look, I'm from Houston. I know lots of people who serve on the board of natural gas companies. You know what they tend to have? They tend to have a background in geology and geophysics. They tend to know something about actually drilling for natural gas. Hunter Biden had none of that experience, but his daddy was vice president of the United States. And we have Joe Biden on film publicly and proudly bragging about how he threatened Ukraine with withholding $1 billion in foreign aid unless they fired the prosecutor that was potentially prosecuting Burisma, the company on which his son sat on the board. Now, that's not just a little bit of evidence of corruption. That's serious evidence of corruption. And I think the president was perfectly within his authority to say, you need to investigate that.
Well, as you know, there have been investigations. There's no evidence of wrongdoing. The prosecutor was not looking into Joe Biden and Burisma at the time. And
wait a second,
Vice
George,
President Biden,
who's investigating it? When you say there's no evidence of wrongdoing, Hunter Biden hasn't testified. On its face, there's a lot of smoke there. Whether that was corrupt at the end of the day, I don't know, but there's more than enough evidence to investigate corruption.
Right. And that investigation apparently is continuing now. The president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, reporting back to the White House. The president wants him to report to senators. As you heard, Chairman Nadler says that's a crime in progress.
So look, Jerry Nadler and Adam Schiff are interested in one thing, which is their partisan attacks. You notice they have zero interest in any actual corruption. They don't want to know what happened during Burisma. In fact, they say if you investigate what happened with Hunter Biden, that's a crime in progress. They have zero evidence. You brought up the Inspector General report. Listen, two things happened this week of great consequence. Number one, the Inspector General report, which is unbelievably damning, of the Department of Justice and FBI. The abuse of power that occurred there is stunning. But number two, we actually saw the House of Representatives articles of impeachment, and their entire partisan case collapsed. For weeks and months, they've been promising evidence of criminal conduct. They abandoned all of that and admitted that the evidence doesn't support all of their attacks that have happened before. I think this is the beginning of the end for this show trial that we've seen in the House. I think it's going to come to the Senate. We're going to have fair proceedings, and then it's not going anywhere because the facts aren't there.
Well, just to be clear, then you think there's nothing wrong with the president continuing to ask and having his personal lawyer continue to ask for investigations into Joe Biden and the Democrats?
I think it is perfectly within the authority of the president to investigate corruption and to investigate corruption with allies. We're doing it every day, and by the way, we did it every day under Barack Obama, under Bill Clinton, under George W. Bush. The U.S. Justice Department cooperates with the Justice Departments. You know, when I was at DOJ, I flew to Rome to meet with the Council of Europe, to meet with Justice Departments all throughout Europe, focusing on cybercrime. That's a big part of how you enforce the law. Now, I'm not suggesting that you can cook up fraudulent attacks on your opponents. This would be a very different allegation if someone was saying, if the president had said, please concoct something that isn't real, that would be qualitatively different. That's not what the transcript says. The transcript says, investigate what happened, find out what happened. And the House Democrats, they don't want to find out what happened. They stopped Republicans from calling Hunter Biden. They wanted no witnesses who would say anything to disrupt their narrative, and it's a one-sided partisan narrative that I think a lot of the American people are frustrated with and are ready to move on.
House Republicans were in charge when the Biden revelations were first made and chose not to investigate. Also, you mentioned the Justice Department. William Barr, the Attorney General, told NBC News this week that he didn't have it on his priority list, even though the president wanted to investigate this as well. But I do want to move on to the Senate trial. You heard both Chairman Nadler and Chairman Schiff respond to Senator McConnell's and Lindsey Graham's statement this week. And I do want to put up the impeachment oath, the oath you're going to take before any potential Senate trial. And it says, I solemnly swear or affirm, as the case may be, that in all things appertaining to the trial of the impeachment now pending, I will do impartial justice according to the Constitution and the laws, so help me God. Aren't the comments from Senator McConnell and Senator Graham indicating that they would be in violation of that oath?
Well, look, I fully intend to follow by oath, but the oath of a Senate juror, it has some similarities to a criminal trial, but it has some differences as well. The framers understood that impeachment, particularly the impeachment of a president, is inherently a political exercise. Senators are not required, like jurors in a criminal trial, to be sequestered, not to talk to anyone, not to coordinate. There's no prohibition. And by the way, past trials, you look at the Clinton impeachment trials, the Senate Democrats were all talking with the Clinton White House. You look at this impeachment trial, the House Democrats are all talking with the Senate Democrats. This remains a political process. The framers knew what they were doing when they put it into the political branches. But there are also legal and constitutional standards to be followed. And you know, George, if you go back 3-4 weeks, you remember there was a moment 3-4 weeks ago where every House Democrat began saying the word bribery over and over and over again. I'm sure they said it on your show. The reason is the Democratic Campaign Committee did some polling, and the focus groups told them bribery polled really well, that people thought, ooh, bribery is bad, so that their talking points that everyone used were bribery, bribery, bribery. Well, fast forward to this week. This week, they've abandoned bribery. They don't allege bribery. There's no article of impeachment on bribery. Instead, what they're arguing is they can impeach with zero evidence of a crime. They don't have to prove any criminal law was violated. They don't have to prove any federal law was violated. They don't have to prove the president has a speeding ticket. What we're seeing now, they've abandoned that whole allegation of bribery, and this is fundamentally political opposition. The base, the far left of the House Democrats hate the president, and they're mad at the American people for electing him. And this is trying to undermine an election. And it's why it's not going to go anywhere in the Senate. It's not going to go anywhere in the Senate because the facts don't back them up. You heard lots of rhetoric from Schiff and Nadler, but what we didn't hear was actual facts because the witnesses did not demonstrate any law was broken. And that doesn't meet the constitutional standard for impeachment, which is treason, bribery, or other high crimes or misdemeanors.
But it doesn't require a crime.
They haven't met the burden of proof.
It doesn't require a crime, as you know. But the final question, are there 51 votes in the Senate for the quick trial with no witnesses?
Well, listen, I think there are 51 votes in the Senate for a fair trial. What we've seen in the House was a partisan show trial. It was one-sided. They didn't allow the White House to cross-examine the witnesses. They didn't allow the Republicans, the minority, to call any witnesses. The Senate, I'm confident, is going to do much, much better. We're going to have a fair trial. We're going to respect due process. I think that means we allow both sides to present their case. We should allow the House managers to do their very best and present their case. But you can be sure we're going to allow the president to defend himself as well. And that means, I believe, if the president wants to call witnesses, if the president wants to call Hunter Biden or wants to call the whistleblower, the Senate should allow the president to do so. We need to ensure that we're respecting due process, having a fair trial, listening to the facts and evidence. And I'm confident that once we do so, this show trial from the House, that proceeding will be over, and we'll leave it to the American people to have the choice to select who our leaders should be.
Senator Cruz, thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you, George.